As much as I like to complain about the new college football playoff, which, I'll be the first one to admit to you, I was fine with the BCS championship model. I was fine with the 14 playoff. I would definitely prefer, at least to me, always in general, that less teams the better, because to me it matters. That's having those playoff spots. It means more to actually get in. It makes the bowl games matter. But as I was kind of thinking about preparing for this episode, the one thing that does come to mind about, having more teams in the playoff, which is a benefit that I don't think a lot of people really kind of expand upon enough, is, is teams aren't necessarily defined by one game anymore. Well, we could look back and talk about, TCU, for example. They had that remarkable run and then they got their ass whooped in the national title game by Georgia. So, when you think about that, everybody talks about that, the ass whooping to Georgia, not the other not the other 12, 13 wins that they had before. But what's different now is, even we can talk about Notre Dame, for example, like, their victory versus Texas A&M and the upset that they had versus that they lost to Northern Illinois is pretty much on the back burner at this point. I mean, they've recovered really well. They they made Navy make a lot of mistakes, which, they had six turnovers, and, granted, a lot of them were, I would argue, were, sort of, fumbles on options and things like that were kind of more or less kind of sloppy play, as opposed to Notre Dame doing anything. But what's good about it moving forward is you can kind of look at everything and as a full package, as almost like a resume, as opposed to kind of saying, oh, well, they lost to that one team, that means it's over. And, just like as I talked about Penn State in a previous episode about the 12-team playoff benefiting them the most, it also benefits Notre Dame really well too. And, moving forward, looking at this Notre Dame team, you know, obviously the valid criticisms are there. I mean, when I look at Notre Dame the past 3 seasons with Marcus Freeman, they've always had that one upset loss. We can go back to 2022 and talk about Marshall, 2023 with Stanford, and 2024 the aforementioned Northern Illinois game. But, what I will say about Marcus Freeman is, you know, he has an excellent defensive background and was a phenomenal defensive coordinator. He understands how to sell Notre Dame to recruits and has done quite well on the recruiting trail. He's 13th right now in the 2025 class, and, for example, he lost Deuce Knight to the Auburn Tigers, but was able to get Blake Herbert instead. So he seems like he could possibly be the incumbent quarterback unless they decide to go the transfer portal route like they did with Riley Leonard this year. And, also too, let's give Marcus Freeman a lot of credit for assembling a really strong staff here. I don't think Al Golden, for example, gets a lot of credit for, a lot of the schemes that he's developed. And, you know, he's done an excellent job. I mean, we can even talk about his history at Temple and Miami and all that, but I don't think a lot of the success that's happening is without having that type of coaching. And also, Marcus Freeman kind of being able to take more of a, CEO sort of approach, as opposed to Marcus Freeman kind of having to, baby the defense, kind of like how, I just mentioned Auburn, for example, kind of like how Auburn, Hugh Freeze now has to call plays because, Phil Montgomery last year couldn't get the job done, and now Hugh Freeze is like, oh shit, I can't trust anybody to do it now. So it's good that he's having that approach. But, as you look at this roster and as seeing the games of the past couple weeks, the main criticism that Notre Dame has had is, hey, the defense has been excellent, but the offense has been a little stagnant. I mean, obviously Riley Leonard has some injury issues, not only at Duke but also this year. But I think what Mike Denbrock has done a really good job with is, not forcing Riley Leonard to necessarily have to be the guy to take over games. The rushing attack is really going right now. Jeremiyah Love, who, I would almost argue that Jeremiyah Love is going to be a bigger factor of their long-term success than Riley Leonard. And what I mean by that is I think Jeremiyah Love is such a unique weapon in the sense he's 6 foot, 206 pounds, 500 rushing yards this year, 9 touchdowns. He's shifty, he's crafty, he's elusive, and he all the intangibles, are evident on the tape, and it's one of those things where he's just so exciting to watch. And I definitely anticipate, as things kind of go along that I think Notre Dame can be really creative in terms of how they use them. For example, why not try to get him in the passing game going a little bit more? Because yes, Riley Leonard has 8 touchdowns this year and 1,300 passing yards, and I know they're trying to find the balance of not necessarily making him have to be the sort of MVP, but they do have some weapons on this team, and it's not necessarily completely out of the question for Notre Dame to make a serious run here. Now, obviously, the defense still has to play just as stout, and you look at their schedule coming up. I mean, you have Virginia coming up, you have USC, you go to Army, so I mean, there definitely some, and Virginia too. So you have some winnable. You definitely have, I would argue, probably a schedule that you definitely have to win out. I mean, USC is obviously always a tricky game because yes, they haven't been as good. Yes, they've been a disappointment this year, but it's always one of those teams on the schedule you have to respect no matter what. And what you have with USC outside of the roster in general is obviously them being an independent. Well, yeah, they play Florida State too, but yeah, having them be an independent, you know, there's obviously some pros and cons. It's like anything else in life. I mean, for starters, yes, you have the NBC deal, you have your own autonomy, and you have the scheduling agreement with the ACC, so you can kind of find a balance of having a sort of a de facto conference, but also you have the liberty to kind of be like, hey, I don't have to be a part of the ACC because I have all the revenue agreements with NBC, and obviously the history of the Lou Holtzes, the Coach Devine, and I think about Charlie Weiss and Brian Kelly, somebody who I grew up watching. So it's like when you think about all that history, I mean, the story speaks for itself, and the program, so much history surrounding it. That's the main selling point. But playing in that independent conference, I mean, at least logistically speaking, in terms of the playoff, you struggle with you're automatically not going to be in any sort of conference game, which in terms of rankings, well, okay, you're going to have a little bit of a longer run in terms of getting there. That's obviously number one. And then number two is, okay, you're not going to have any sort of bye week moving forward. And let's just play devil's advocate and say, hey, they go through Florida State, no problem. They go through Virginia, they go through Army, they go through USC, and everything's kosher, and they only have that 11-1 loss and that 11-1 record. So all of that's great. So now let's say you're sitting there at around 7th, 8th seed. From the projections that we've seen, it could be. I think for them, it's going to be really important for them to kind of have a home game, because I think this team definitely it's definitely a lot more different playing in South Bend, Indiana, than if they were to have to travel on the road too. Especially considering too that they're going to be on they're probably going to be on a bye on having some extra time with the bye week too, because they don't have to worry about a conference game either. So I think when you also have that in mind, it could serve as a positive in the sense of, okay, if Notre Dame is a little banged up going into the college football playoff and everything goes smooth, hey, maybe their players get a little healthier. Hey, maybe they have a little bit more time to prepare for a couple possible opponents. But then on the flip side of that, when the committee is going to be thinking about resumes, for example, they're going to be saying to themselves, well, they don't have a conference championship game, so you obviously have to make Notre Dame lose a couple brownie points for that, because I would argue a team that lost in their conference championship game and only lost twice, and if their only other loss that year is because of their conference game, I would probably have to argue that Notre Dame, they have to be in front of Notre Dame. And obviously there's a lot of variables with that. So let's, don't hate on me too much, but the thing about Notre Dame is they have to dominate from this point out. It's not that they didn't necessarily dominate Navy, but I would argue a lot of those mistakes that happened were, self-inflicted. So if we can get to a point where, I think Florida State could be a great example of a game where, we just see them, we just see them flat out dominate, and we need to see that on the scoreboard. We need to see that statistically, And I think we also just need to see a little bit more intensity from Marcus Freeman in general in terms of the press conferences and all of that too, because I do think he's a brilliant motivator. He's somebody that he's great to listen to and all that good stuff. But if if you do want to be a possible threat into this college football playoff, those are just mitigating factors that no matter how good Notre Dame is in the regular season, those are just things that they're going to have to contend with in general. And for anybody who's followed the college football playoff, and you could talk about the shit show that was Florida State last year. You really never know what the committee's thinking, which can be a positive to some degree, but also just like us human beings, we have flaws and we are certainly inconsistent. So I am fascinated and intrigued with how Notre Dame's playoff picture is going to shape up, because if we're talking about the ACC, I mean, obviously Miami's going to be represented. Clemson is a 2-loss team now, so you could struggle with getting Clemson in. And if let's say SMU runs the table, that could be obviously Notre Dame's a de facto ACC, but if it's certainly possible we see three, I put in air quotes, 3 ACC teams in the college football playoff right now, because obviously number 12 would be Boise State, who would be the group of 5 who gets in, and then also we have LSU and Alabama this weekend. That's probably going to be a sort of a deciding playoff game, and you have Texas A&M, who lost South Carolina over the weekend, so they're certainly going to be reeling and wanting to have a bounce back game. But in terms of Notre Dame, I think right now they're in a really good position to be a threat and to make a run right now. You can put the whole Northern Illinois thing behind them, and right now they have just about everything going for them. As long as Riley Leonard can continue to stay healthy, they continue to be creative in terms of using Jeremiyah Love. Make sure you're instilling some more confidence in Riley Leonard, because he has every God-given athletic ability in the world. But there's just some moments in time where he's just trying a little bit too hard to make plays as opposed to letting the game come to him. But I do think he has every ability in the world to be the calm, composed, poised leader that I would agree that every Notre Dame fan sees in him. And let Al Golden keep doing his thing on defense. I mean, you have a really strong secondary who doesn't give up too many big plays. You have a defensive line who can stop the run and makes you beat you by playing disciplined football and complementary football. And when you have a coach like Marcus Freeman, who has done his thing, 26-9 over three seasons, there's definitely a lot to be excited about. And I definitely would argue that they can be a potential dangerous team, to be a dangerous team in the college football playoff. But at the same time, a lot of things do have to go right for them, and they have to continue taking care of business if they want to be a threat in the 2024 college football playoff.